everybody. We're back. This is Lacey,
And I'm Lauren.
and we're here for another episode of the Lawmas podcast.
So today we're kind of going to dig in more to we're going to dig into Gypsy Rose and then go back into the Menendez brothers. But
Mhm.
one thing I want to ask you, Lacey, is a question beforehand we get started, and it tags
Yeah.
off of the last one and
Okay.
some things like feedback from the media and that type stuff. How much role in the case does it play what your defendant or your client wears when they testify on the stand? Because as we talked about, the Menendez
Yeah.
brothers got a lot of like flack from the news out and all that stuff about their dress. So what do you think about if you know your client's going on the stand? I know you kind of
Right.
touched on it before, but what are the big things you tell them?
Yeah. So the big things I want is I want my client to connect with the jury, right? So if my client's in a 5-piece suit and shoes more expensive than my fee, most likely they're not going to connect to the jury. There may be one, two if we're lucky, but especially in Richland County, a poorer part of the state. Lexington I think does have more money. They might resonate a little bit more over there with something like that, but definitely not Richland. But you want them to appear, if they went and sat in the jury, you don't want them to stick out, right? You want them to resonate. So something that I want my clients to wear is something nice that shows that this is important to you, but not too nice in that you are better than anybody in that courtroom. So if my client wants to wear a suit jacket, I don't want a tie. I don't want the shirt buttoned up just a little bit and then have it open, right? If they do a suit, if no suit, a nice dress shirt and some kind of dress pants, khakis, or black or navy pants. You want to watch out for colors. Red is really loud. You want colors that are going to soften your client. I don't think it should be this way, but unfortunately it is. Even though the burden is on the state, we sit farthest from the jury with our clients. And that always bothers me because it's my client that you're determining whether or not has committed a crime. And I feel like they should be the ones sitting beside the jury. They are a human, they are a person, just like anybody else. And you're there to determine whether or not they're guilty or innocent. And so, I just think a lot of times juries come in and are looking at the defendant like, gosh, what have they done? Instead of, did they do this or did they not? And so that's why I want softer colors, not something that's going to be really loud, and something that blends and doesn't look too flashy.
And would you give them the same pretty much advice, whether they're taking the stand or not, on their clothes? Because the jury will see
Yeah.
them regardless.
Yeah, and I'm very sexist in that most of my clients are men. There's a lot of men, but let's roll it back with women and what they are wearing. I guess with Menendez brothers, I went into what a male should wear, but for women, we do not want a dress that is really short. If there's a dress or a skirt, you want it coming down to the knee at least. I would advise my client not to wear a shirt that is too low cut. So those are the things I'm looking at, and probably similar color schemes. I do think women can probably get away with darker colors more so than males. I don't think that matters as much with women for whatever reason. It's just in my head. So those are the things that I would look for because we are such a conservative state, and I do believe those things show a direct, hey, I'm taking this seriously. I think women should be able to wear whatever they want to wear, but that depends on the venue, right? If you want to bring out the low cut shirt and the mini skirt, go for it, whatever you want to do. But we got to think of the venue that we're wearing it at. Just like, women, we wouldn't wear that to a funeral. We don't want to wear that to the courtroom. We're going to save that for dinner with our girlfriends when we go out to the club.
Yeah, and I think I think even in the civil side of things, we definitely want our clients to not dress too nice. I mean, we're usually fine. Like if they're like an engineer or something, wearing that suit and tie because that's their normal way,
Right.
but not wearing, some Gucci shoes that are worth like $10,000 when most of my juries
Yeah.
don't have that. And I will say, I respect any woman who wears black no matter what, because we all know, like, as women, we want to wear black and navy to look our best. So I think that's
Yeah.
another thing with women. But we're going to jump into a woman who helped kill her mom today.
Yeah.
So I think I'll know her, Gypsy Rose.
Yeah. So you're talking about on the last episode, with being so invested in true crime, and I have too for far too long, and it's probably from my mom as well. She watches the same shows I do still to this day, so I know it comes from her. But Gypsy Rose is a story I've known about for such a long time. So it's one of I've watched so many things and read so many things, so I've just been fascinated with that story for as long as I can remember. So Gypsy Rose, her mother had Munchausen by proxy, and if you don't know what that is, it's a mental illness. Munchausen syndrome is when someone thinks that they are sick when they're not. It's pretty much in their head, and they believe, all these diagnoses and stuff. Munchausen by proxy is when you believe your child or another family member is sick when they're not. So Gypsy Rose, she was in the news as a kid. She got to go to Disney World as a kid because it appeared at the time she was very sick. Her mother said that she had cancer. They had said they lost everything. One state
Katrina.
built them a home. Yet during Katrina, they lost everything. So, a community pulled together to build a house with a wheelchair ramp. So that way, Gypsy, who was wheelchair bound, so we thought at the time, could get in and out of the home. She would take her to several doctors. She gave her all kinds of medication that made all of her teeth fall out, made all of her hair fall out. And it turns out that she wasn't sick at all, ever. This was all her mother's mental illness. And I don't know how the doctors didn't catch it. I do believe she saw different physicians.
She did. And one of the things was, they were in Katrina, so they moved around a lot, and
Right,
this was before. This was like in the 90s, and Gypsy Rose is actually only a few years younger than me and Lacey. So, like,
right.
pretty much her story, we've been the same age as her during this, but it was before the days where my charts could talk to everything, like, in the medical system wasn't as connected. So they moved around, and then one of her biggest things was Katrina. Well, I lost all her medical records. We have nothing. And they weren't digitized like they are. I feel like in 2025, this would be harder to happen because
I
of the
agree.
way we do our systems.
I
But
agree.
back then, so much stuff was still paper and files. So she got away with a lot more.
Yeah. So as Gypsy gets older, she's realizing this. She's having secret. She's getting online in secret, and she meets this guy, and she wants to escape her mom. She knows she can walk at this point. And when I mean, maybe I don't know if when mom was home she walked, and this she just wasn't supposed to in public, but she realized these things and was realizing kind of what was going on. And she did have, like, her dad was alive, and the dad just believed the mom. He had no reason not to. So he thought his daughter was very sick, and like that mom needed to take care of her. So he kind of took the back seat and wasn't around much because he thought like she was just so sick, and how grateful he was to have her mother, who was so invested in her medical care, to be there for her.
Well, and one thing I didn't realize with them till recently, her mama was 24 and he was 17 when
I
they
didn't
got
know that.
the Gypsy, and they got married, and he had just turned 18. So, like, in today's time,
Oh,
mama raped him. I mean, statutory rape. Like,
correct. Right. That's interesting.
so
I didn't
that
know that
was
either.
something I had started reading some more articles about timelines, and I saw that, like, because she got pregnant when they're 1991. He was 18 years old when they got married. So, like,
Yeah.
he didn't know what he was
Yeah.
doing. Like, not
Right.
to
And he
make
probably trusted her
excuses.
being older, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah. So she probably knew. Yeah. I didn't know that at all. Um, so when she realizes everything, and has this online relationship, they concoct a plan to kill Dee Dee. That was her mother's name. And so the guy came to her house and waited. I think they were at an appointment or something, came home and ended up stabbing and killing the mom. So Gypsy did not actually, as far as we know, kill the mom. She was just a part of the plan to kill her mom. She did, I believe they had sex after he killed her. They escaped together. They left together. She was in disguise. They were later arrested. He ended up going to trial and getting convicted of the murder, and I believe he got life in prison.
And
She
she
was,
testified in his trial.
yeah, and she was only sentenced to 10 years in prison. I can't remember what exactly her conviction was, but it
She got
was
second degree murder,
second degree
and
murder.
she
Okay.
pled to it. So
Correct.
one thing I think the prosecutors in her case, I'll acknowledge she was a victim
Right.
of being abused. But yes, she pled second degree, and it's kind of crazy. Like in her situation, I didn't realize this till I was reading some stuff the other night. Her mom actually, from the time she was 3 months old, started this. She went to doctors telling them her baby had sleep apnea, chromosomal defects. So this
Right.
didn't happen as Gypsy grew up her entire life not knowing this.
Yeah.
And yeah, when he came, they met online. The mom didn't like him originally because I think she kind of knew, oh, he's going to come in and realize. And then one night, Gypsy said in one of her documentaries, her and her mom were like playing cards or something before bed, like something like, or fixing each other's hair, makeovers. It was something like mom daughter stuff. Her mom went to bed. She went and let him in. He came into the house. She hid in the bathroom, stabbed, and while he stabbed her mom to death. And then afterwards, she got on Facebook and wrote, "The bitch is dead."
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So this story is coming to light around the time the Menendez brothers. It's been really in the media a lot in the past year because she was released from prison. She served her sentence and she got out. And so, I told Lauren I wanted to dive in these cases together because, you know, we know that Gypsy Rose was abused. I'm firmly convinced the Menendez brothers was. So let's go with that thought process as we divulge into it more. So let's state that, for this episode, all of us are firmly convinced that the Menendez brothers too were abused. So both of them are abused. Both of them killed or were involved in the killing and planning of their parents. But we have two very significant prison sentences, right? The Menendez brothers both got life in prison, whereas Gypsy Rose is now out. She was married. Now she's divorced. She's with someone else. She's having a baby. She's getting to go through life. And I think me and Lauren both agree that she probably still has a lot of trauma. And I hope that she is still working through that. I can't imagine how you wouldn't, going through what all Gypsy went through. But then why don't the Menendez brothers? Because with the Menendez brothers, like I said, sexually abused by their dad, the younger brother being sexually abused by the dad and the brother, they are not getting any empathy for the abuse that they went through, even though Gypsy did.
Well, I guess
I
one thing I would want to know, and I don't know if this is out there, is did the Menendez brothers get offered any pleas? Because Gypsy took a plea. She didn't risk going to
agree.
trial. And with Gypsy, she might have went to trial and got off, or she might have went to trial and got a life sentence. But she took and I will say, probably part of her plea was saying she would testify against her then boyfriend in his trial. So I do think that played into her plea. But for me, it'd be interesting to see, did the Menendez brothers turn down any pleas
Yeah,
where they wouldn't have got life? Maybe they would have got 30 years or something. So I
agree.
think we have to take that into context too, because Gypsy didn't go to trial. She didn't take a risk.
And it's not necessarily the risk that the judges are looking for in a plea, it's the accountability. So because Gypsy took accountability for her part in the crime, and didn't go to trial, I think that, of course, along with the abuse and what we're talking about here, is what led to a lighter sentence than what the Menendez brothers got. So I definitely agree. Did they get some type of plea where they could take accountability for what they did and still get out at some point and not risk that life sentence? And, we just don't know that. I don't think that's ever come out whether or not they had any type of plea and what those plea agreements were or plea offer was. So in both of these, I just think it's, just worth mentioning the significant impacts of sentencing and how it can, even in similar cases and circumstances, like I think these two cases have, such a difference in the sentencing. Now, the guy that did kill Dee Dee, Gypsy's mom, did get life, so that would be akin to the Menendez brothers, but he was not abused by her. So the Menendez brothers being abused by their parents. So I think that is a clear thing that we can separate, as to why he got life in prison for killing Dee Dee, and differentiate that from the Menendez brothers. And tying all that together, back in this time, we were talking about how, Lauren, you were talking about how things were so different in the 90s, especially in California and stuff. And Gypsy's case was not in California, but we've come so far in the legal system with abuse in general. With men, I think it was always hushed, a lot of abuse, right? Especially if it was by a family member, and it was just suppressed. And I think for men, even more so than women, it's still harder to come forward and say that, a male, it's hard for them to say, I was abused. Not saying it's not hard for women, but in what we see online, I have seen a lot of things that say it's a lot harder for men to come forward. I remember there was a talk show that talked about it, and how it was just, how hard it was for men to come forward and say that another man had abused them. In the Menendez case, it's their own father. And so I think that has come a long way since the 90s as well, where we talk about the Me Too movement and coming forward and believing victims. So I do think that has changed since the 90s as well. Now, they did, like you said, come forward in the first trial and say that they were abused, so that was out there, but it wasn't. But it was suppressed the second trial, like you had said. But I do think that is important to note, and also understanding, we have battered spouses syndrome. And so in some of the cases that you see that deals with that, it typically is a female that's the victim. And if, in cases we've seen where a woman kills her spouse, and it turns out she was a victim of domestic violence for years and years, and it wasn't in the heat of the moment. And that's important to note for these cases too. The Menendez weren't being abused in that moment. Gypsy wasn't being abused, in that moment.
Oh, is her mama still giving her medicine? And like, I think Gypsy's
Yeah,
case, the hard part is it was continual non-stop abuse the entire
yeah,
time she was alive. And I think one thing that separates it for me realistically, Gypsy couldn't leave. Like, Gypsy could not, like, it was hard for her to leave because I think mentally, Gypsy is not an adult when she does this. Like, yes, she was older
agree.
than the Menendez brothers, but she had been on so many medicines and been so screwed up in her head. I would like to know if they did a test on her today. I mean, this is no hate to her at all because she's been
Sure.
through trauma. But what is her actual mental state? I think her and Britney Spears, neither one of them are true adults because of the
Right.
abuse they've suffered. It's definitely the Menendez brothers. What separates me from them is one of them had went off to school at Princeton. Like, that was it for me. Like, you had left. You had went to from California. What, Princeton? Is Princeton in New Jersey? I don't even know where
Yeah.
Princeton is, but it's somewhere like, obviously I was never in the Ivy League group. But they went off and had the opportunity to leave. And I guess that was kind of it for me.
I
Like,
understand that. Yeah.
you left and you came back to kill them. And you left. Your brother was about to be able to leave as well to go to college. Now, I know he says his dad said he couldn't go to Stanford. He had to stay and go to UCLA and live at home. But you're about to be 18 and they have cars. Physically, nothing is halting them from
Hmm.
getting out except the fact they won't live their lavish lifestyle. So I think
Right.
that's kind of like a difference. Gypsy's poor. I mean, like,
Right.
they're not
They're very poor.
rich.
Yeah.
They're living dirt poor. And Gypsy has no other family really because her dad isn't believing anything. Where
Yeah.
I think the Menendez brothers, looking at their stuff, they did have family. Like, there was the dad's sister who honestly believed they were abused. I think they had more resources than what Gypsy did is a huge difference to me.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note. We're tying this abuse into how we've come far with battered spouse syndrome, and understanding how somebody could be defending themselves from harm, even if it's not in the heat of harm. In those cases that we're seeing where that's brought up, they are still living together. They aren't apart. And the woman, in most cases, like I said, I'm not saying it can't happen for men, but in most cases for women, they can't. They feel like they can't escape. They can't escape the abuse. They can't escape the situation. So it's important to note what you said. That is significantly different. That ties along more into Gypsy, where she doesn't have any resources or anything to get out. And so, as we wrap up these cases and tying them together, I'm gonna get my thoughts on what I think the appropriate sentencing should be, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, Lauren. I think Gypsy. I think it was appropriate. I'm okay with the 10 years. I think she did play a part in it. She had so much abuse. Although if they had let her off the hook, I think I would have been fine with that too. But I'm okay that it was the 10 years. For the Menendez brothers, I think I don't buy the self-defense. I will say that, like, that they should not have served any time. However, I do struggle with first degree murder and a life sentence because of their abuse. So I don't, if I had to give a number, I think I would say 20 to 25. Like you were kind of saying with the plea negotiations was at 30. So I think minimum 20, max, 25, 30. But I definitely do not think they should have gotten a life sentence given. I do believe that they were abused, but taken into account, like you said, that they were able to escape it.
And I think for me, I agree. I think Gypsy should serve some time because she did. It's hard for me because I do think mentally she was not an adult, but
Right.
she did get on a computer, find a boyfriend, bring him to her house, and plan a murder with
Yeah.
him.
Or the purpose
So
of killing her. Yeah.
if they would have, I don't think she deserved life, but I think 10 to 15 would have been very appropriate for her because I do believe she was abused and her mama abused her from day one. Like,
Yeah.
and she lived that life and she couldn't escape. And I feel sorry for her. I do, but I still think we have to have accountability for our actions. And she did plan a murder. 100%. She planned this murder.
Right.
And the
Right.
fact, I guess, for me, in that documentary where she comes out and talks about, oh yeah, we were doing our nails and all before I was going to murder her that night. So I do think she was very much part of it. Um, I think she has came out very remorseful.
Yeah.
Um, and I do think she's the whole time she has taken accountability for what she did. I do hope she is in therapy. I hope I know her dad has came back into her life.
Fully embraced her. Right.
I hope he's also going to therapy too to know how to help her. So I
Sure.
hope her family is giving, and I hope this new boyfriend that is her baby daddy, same thing. I don't want her to get locked up in a cycle of abuse. So I'm hoping they are breaking this and all getting the help and medications they need.
And
As
she
far
has
as
said, before you switch to Menendez, with accountability, she has said this was not the way for me to escape. This was
she
not the
did.
right decision. I should have made different choices to get out of the abuse.
And I think in hindsight, maybe she could have, and things would have been a lot different.
Yeah.
But for the Menendez brothers, I guess part of it for me is, do I believe their abuse stories or
Sure.
not? I
Right.
mean, like, I will say, watching their testimony on the stand, they were very, very convincing. And watching while the older one testified and told his little brother he was sorry for abusing him and seeing both their tears, I don't believe they could act that good. But then we're in Hollywood, so who knows? Like, are they just very skilled actors? So I think that is part of it to me, is were they truly abused or not. But even so, with if let's say they were abused, I do think it's hard. I mean, was it with them because the older one was gone?
Yeah.
He could go get his brother out, and they clearly planned this, and they brutally murdered their parents.
Now, with the older one getting out and the younger one not yet being out, do you think there should have been different sentences then?
I think there could have been the older one abused the younger one. Like the
So
younger
you
one
believe the
still was,
older one's more culpable?
Yeah, because if
Okay.
it had just been the younger one by himself, still living in the environment, but the two of them, and I know siblings can be very close. They almost said they were like on a twin like level of closeness, like
Yeah.
that bond.
And trauma
But
bonding.
yes, but ultimately, they deserve a very long sentence to me because they had options and they had money. Like, there was cash laying around that house. They could have stole, got out, been gone. They had family with connections. I know their dad was in a lot of power, so that did make it more difficult. But I feel like, as far as the options go, they had a lot more than other people haven't. They had a lot more than a battered wife because these were parents. These were not spouses in this situation, and they were grown adults at this point, and they didn't grow up, I don't think. um I think they could have told their teachers, or they could have went to somebody, went to the police with this abuse. But in every interview right after this happened, all they did was talk about how they loved their parents. And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of it too. Like, I don't know. That's kind of where I don't know. And I'm not a psychiatrist, so I can't read into all that. Maybe life wasn't appropriate, but then we have to think about their danger to others as well in this. Like, I don't know. I've listened to them talk. They're both very well spoken. One thing they said, well, oh, we couldn't have done it for the money because we were the only kids. We're going to get it anyways. That, as an estate attorney, struck me as like not a good statement because your parents could have easily wrote a will and
Yeah.
given it to charity. So, like, that kind of thought process, saying those things even after the fact, make me do question it. And I do think they were
Okay.
affluenza kids. They were
Yeah.
100% spoiled affluenza kids. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. I mean, I think 30 years minimum for the older one, at least,
Okay.
maybe a little less for the younger one, but they 100% premeditatedly killed their parents.
So
I do
maybe
put
not life, but a way more significant prison sentence and potentially differing sentences for the both for each brother.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, and everything goes into our opinion, right? We're in two different kinds of law. I think us being moms as well plays into that. I do think, um, thinking of a mother abusing her child, we have a lot of empathy towards that. And I think that's why, with the Menendez, I have so much empathy too. Because again, I do believe he abused them, but I do understand the difference in that they were able to get out. And so I think that plays a part in our thinking process too. And this is how juries think too, guys, when trying to figure out credibility in cases and take in all different aspects of their lives. And you have two attorneys on here that we're on board on one case and we're so significantly different on the other, and that's part of our judicial system. So I think that's a good way to wrap that up, and how many people's thought processes go into just one case, with juries and a judge.
Well, I will say I'm one of the most empathetic people in the world if I think you deserve my empathy.
Yeah.
So I know I have
Right.
honesty to love it. And I don't know, maybe if I really do see if they're truly sexual abuse, I still think they both deserve probably 20 years plus just because it
One
is.
had escaped it. One was already out and chose to go back and deal with it in a way that they should not have dealt with it.
But if you guys have opinions, definitely
Yeah.
let us know what your opinions are. We'd love to hear. Maybe we'll post a poll on it and see. And then if there's cases you want us to dig into, let us know.
Yep. All right. We'll see y'all next week. Bye.
Bye.